Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Dare to be Fearless. For those who don't know, I am a former Radio Disney host and serial entrepreneur. I host Dare to be Fearless every single almost Wednesday and have for the past 4+ years after I left Disney. And now I really have essentially two different parts of my company, which is like the Alexa Curtis brand, what you're watching, my social media, my weekly newsletter called Stay Fearless or Die Trying. And the other part is my new startup called Chief Swag Officer. So we make tons of different customized bespoke products for media professionals. If you want a discount to get 10% off your first order on Chief Swag, head to the show notes and go to chiefswagofficer.com to get that product that you want. This is a bit of a different episode than I usually have. I am in Connecticut. My mom had a knee replacement. She wanted me to come back. I've been filming a bunch of content here. I've been having a lot of fun with it. And so I managed to get a few founders actually on the show while I'm in town that I have been following or a fan of for quite some time. In particular today, Nicole, who is the co-founder of the Sandy Hook Promise. On December 14th, 2012, a devastating situation happened in Connecticut. 26 kids were murdered in Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. I will never forget the day that this occurred because I was a sophomore in high school, I think, and it was about 2 or so hours away from where the shooting was. And I'll just never forget, kids started getting phone calls from their parents, and a teacher came into the classroom that I was in, and I remember just said, I actually think I was in middle school, not high school. Wow, I think I was in middle school. And I remember they put the school on lockdown because at the time they couldn't find the shooter for about, I think, an hour or something into the tragedy that occurred at Sandy Hook. So essentially every single Connecticut school was put on lockdown, my school included, and it was a very scary time. Now, the Sandy Hook Promise is a phenomenal organization that's led by Nicole and Mark. Nicole is originally from Rhode Island, but lives in Connecticut now. We actually have quite a similarity because she spent a lot of years in England. And her son Dylan was murdered on that day in December. For those who are curious, my personal opinion on guns, I feel like I'm at a point in my career where I can just say there's certain things that I am not flexible on. I believe that, honestly, if it was my choice that all guns should be abolished, I know that will never happen with the NRA. But if it could happen, I would be in support of it. I'm very pro woman's choice. I believe that a woman has a choice to do whatever she wants with her body. And I am quite anti the death penalty. So that's just a few heavy hitter things. I feel like there's nothing else really that I can say that can offend someone. So if you still want to follow me and you agree with what I'm saying, that's great. If you don't, no problem. I'm also a firm believer that people have their own personal thoughts on a lot of these kind of different topics. And I think the sweet spot with people is being able to say, I can have a conversation with someone even if they don't agree with what I am thinking. And I really wish that we were at a point in society where we could get to that. Fortunately, we're not, but I wish we could. So when I reached out to Nicole, I was just thrilled that her and her team replied because gun violence, gun prevention is something that is really close to me that I would like to see done and discussed more. And so she is here today. Before I get into introducing Nicole, make sure that you follow Dare to be Fearless on social media, which is at Dare to be Fearless, and my personal social media, which is at Alexa_Curtis. Nicole, thank you so much for coming to the show today.
Thank you for having me.
I love that you have such a phenomenal background in business because that is quite inspiring. You know, a lot of people who watch this particular show are interested in how to start businesses, how to pursue something different with their life.
Yeah.
I know a tragedy occurred on December 12th, December 14th, 2012.
Yeah.
The day I was, I think, a sophomore in high school, actually, at that time. And you are now the co-founder of an organization called the Sandy Hook Promise, which is a phenomenal organization. You have stopped, I think I read on the website, 16 or more.
16 school shootings that we know of.
Which is remarkable with the work that you guys have done.
Thank you.
Before I get into, you know, what you've done with Sandy Hook Promise, kind of walk me through your childhood growing up. I mean, how did you decide to, you know, get into business, etc.?
Oh, golly. So I grew up in Rhode Island, where I was born and raised, and I'm an only child and was always doing everything. If there was a club, I was in it. If there was a theater group, I was in it. If there was dance, I was in it. And just a very active person and really had no clue. I mean, if you asked me when I was young, and this is the honest to God truth, what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said the first female president of the United
you
States,
were one of
which
those.
is hysterical, since I'm actually crap at politics. But that was my early ambition. I've always been a very ambitious and driven person. After I graduated college, I moved to England and I lived there for 18 years because I met a guy when I was an exchange student. We ended up getting married. And I had 2 kids out there. The goal had always been to get back to the States, though. I was only going to be in England for 2 years, and it ended up being 18. But while I was there, my career really kicked off in marketing and communications. So I led large areas of product development and marketing and PR for a few different financial services and health insurance companies, always kind of behind the scenes, teaching others how to speak to media, writing speeches, and doing a lot of work like that. But I really loved creating things and figuring out how to solve problems and looking after my teams. And then when we finally decided to move back to the States with my 2 little boys in tow, I decided at that point to take a break from corporate life. And my plan was to take a break for 2 years because I was, honestly, Alexa, I was a weekend mom. I had to leave the house 2 hours. It took me a 2-hour commute each way to my job in London. So I left when the kids were still asleep. I came home after they went to bed. And that's not what I wanted from motherhood. So when we moved to the States, I said, I'm going to focus on my kids for a couple of years at least, get them settled. Dylan, my youngest, had recently been diagnosed with autism. So I wanted to explore that and understand that and help him reach whatever his potential was and get my family settled. And then just shy of, we moved here in January 2011, and then December 2012, just less than 2 years later, both of my boys went to Sandy Hook School that morning, and my eldest, Jake, came home, and Dylan was killed in his first grade classroom. And I'm just that sort of person that needs to do something. So I have no idea at that time what I was going to do, but I helped launch the organization 1 month after the shooting and then figured I'd figure out how to solve it like any other problem I've tried to solve. And that's where I am now today.
Well, thank you for starting this organization.
Thank you.
I've always been personally very anti-gun.
Mm-hmm.
And so, earlier on in my career, I felt like as a young person, I couldn't really, I think, so openly talk about specific things that I had firm beliefs on. But this is one in particular that I've always been a firm believer on. What part of England were you guys in?
So I started off in Norwich, which is kind of the east side, and then we moved down to Hampshire, pretty much on the south coast, and I worked a lot there, and then the last few years worked up in London.
That's so funny because I just kind of relocated there. My mom's British, so I have dual citizenship, and I live in Shoreditch.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah. But, the career thing, I think for a lot of women is you seem like you were a career woman before you had kids. And
sure.
And then when you had kids, it seems like, did that slow down for you to where like you wanted to be more present?
No, well, yes and no. I am a very driven person, and I got married. I got married a couple of weeks after my 22nd birthday.
Okay.
But I didn't have kids until I was 33. So I was very focused on my career. And in my early stages, I didn't actually ever see myself as a mother or wanting kids. And then when I decided, it was like immediate. I was like, I want kids now. I want 10 of them. I wanted to be a mom. I love my mother. I've had a wonderful experience with her for my whole life. She's been there. She's the only person that's been there for me every single day. And I knew I wanted to do that and have more than just a career, because for me it was kind of like, what's the point of just having a fantastic career if I'm not creating pathways for someone else and sharing that love. So having my 2 kids, it didn't slow down my career at all. And I think there's pluses and minuses to that, because I definitely missed a lot of those very early years because I was just seeing them on weekends. And we had a fabulous nanny who did a great job, and she and I had a very close friendship, but those were, they're my babies.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to slow down or change my career train to be a mom, because I think you can do both. And I was not balanced at that point.
Looking back, do you regret the lack of balance you had on those early on days, or?
Definitely there are things that I wish I'd done differently. Perhaps worked closer to home or done something that, I am that sort of person, and my surviving son Jake still jokes, like, if I'm focused on doing something, the house could be burning down around me and I wouldn't even notice.
Yeah.
Because I'm so focused on the work. So I would easily do 12, 14-hour days without realizing the passage of time. And I think, at the end of the day, I don't want to be remembered or have my family remember me as, well, she worked a lot. And I know that has provided for them and provided opportunities, but really all you want is time. And especially since Dylan's murder at the age of 6, I'm acutely aware of what's important and what's really not.
I can only imagine, that kind of trauma, right, that you go through. What was the difference in age with both of them?
20 months.
Oh, so they were like very close.
Yeah.
What's one thing that you remember about Dylan that you...
Oh my gosh, I remember everything about Dylan. He was a cuddler. He had these gorgeous blue eyes and this really mischievous smile, and super cute when he was missing some of his teeth as well. But he used to cling to me, kind of like if you imagine a koala and holding its baby at the side, he was always holding on to me. He always wanted to be close and cuddle, which I really appreciated as well, because having spoken with other parents that have autistic children, sometimes touch is not a sensation that a lot of kids like on the spectrum, but Dylan wanted close, deep touch and was always there. And I just, I miss him every single day. He lives on in my heart and in my memory, but he should really be here.
Yep, of course. The term survivor, right, has to be exactly what everyone who went through or has gone through anything similar to this type of tragedy is defined as. A month after the tragedy occurred, you guys started Sandy Hook Promise. Was there a meeting? Was there someone who...
Yeah, well, it wasn't me that really started it, or anyone that was directly impacted in terms of loss. There was a group of community members. There was a gentleman by the name of Lee Shull who gathered people, I believe that night after the shooting, at I think it was Holcomb Hills in Newtown, and they all gathered because no one knew what to do. It impacted our entire community. We're a relatively small community.
And it's a small town.
It's a small town, and there's 4 elementary schools, I think. So, a quarter of the town had their kids at Sandy Hook School. And Lee gathered people together, and then that became a series of meetings, I think at the library, where there were like hundreds of people, and then they distilled it down. Around Christmas time, they started reaching out. This was December 14th. Christmas time was so soon after, 2 weeks after, and they were reaching out to impacted families. And I remember when one of the gentlemen, Tom Bittman, and his wife Lillian came to see me, and they said, this is what we're doing. We're creating a platform for change, and it's for families to do whatever they want with. Not every family wanted to be involved with it. I certainly did, because I thought I want to do something, and I want to figure out what that something is. So got heavily involved, and then we all helped co-launch the organization 1 month after, and then I think I was officially employee number 2 or 3 when we finally actually started employing people in March 2013.
Were you and your husband still working your jobs then?
Well, yes and no. I had been in the process of setting up a health and fitness studio because that was my new love. I got heavily into kickboxing and jiu-jitsu, which is
I love that. I love to box. I love boxing.
It's a great exercise. Can wreak havoc on your body over time. I've had both hips replaced now, but loved it, and really wanted to focus on health and nutrition. Rather than go back to corporate life, I'm still a business person. I wanted to set up a new business. So I was in the process of setting that up when everything happened, and my husband We've since divorced, but he worked at IBM, and he wasn't working at that point. He took a leave of absence and eventually left corporate life altogether to run a separate private foundation for Dylan. We're still very close friends. We talk almost every single day. We co-parent Jake incredibly well. But no, we were not working at that time.
Got it. So then I'm assuming that fitness endeavor
didn't go ahead.
It didn't go ahead.
Yep.
Which makes sense. Also, like 2 hip replacements, kickboxing, that's changing the world in a different way than this kind of organization.
Very true.
Yeah.
Still in service of people.
Yeah.
But quite different.
With your and your now ex-husband's relationship, was it the tragedy that kind of made you drift apart? Or
I think it was the tragedy. Like I said, we got married a couple of weeks after I turned 22. So we had been married 22 years by the time the tragedy happened. And our relationship, I'm not going to say like everything was always perfect. You can't be married to someone for a couple of decades and not go through your rough patches. I do think, I am curious sometimes, had Sandy Hook not happened, would we still be married or not? But after Sandy Hook, we grieved very, very differently. And everything just got so dark and we just couldn't find each other again. And I've known there are other families from Sandy Hook that their relationship has gotten stronger. And then there are other families of Sandy Hook that have also divorced. And I think the loss of a child, unfortunately, the general stats, as I understand them, are that most parents split up after the death of a child. It can just be too hard. But I'm grateful for our friendship, and I'm grateful for the way that we have continued to co-parent Jake and show a united front on everything that we do.
I feel like it's a sense of maturity that both parties must have in any divorce, tragedy or no tragedy.
Yeah.
But especially in this type of scenario.
I still respect him and love him as a friend. He's still the father of my children, and I will support him until the day I die and make sure that he is happy and successful.
Yeah. I'm originally from Mansfield, which is like a super small town.
Yeah.
And I find a lot of these tiny towns, a lot of people get married really young. You're not even from Connecticut, but I would say probably all of these like New England towns. And sometimes, I've done something so opposite of that with my life, but when I come back here, everyone I went to high school with is married. Everyone has kids.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like it's really young.
It is young.
How young you guys were.
My surviving Jake is about to turn 21 in July, and I'm like, oh my God, I was a year away from getting married at that point. I got married because my visa was about to run out. Let's be honest.
Oh, did you? Okay.
So it was either leave the country or get married.
But
still, it was, in retrospect, 22. Yeah, you're a baby at 22.
No, you're a baby. 22, 24. I even think 27, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like until I hit 30.
I say to Jake, wait till you hit 30 and then decide what you want from life.
That's what someone told me this the other day, and I was like, thank gosh. So prior to, that day in December, were you ever pro, anti-gun?
I was clueless about guns.
Okay.
Both sides of my family has a military background, Navy. So I learned gun safety from my paternal grandfather when I was a teenager, and he took me to shooting ranges. He had an historical collection. He was a captain in the U.S. Navy, but he taught me respect. I wasn't aware of anything of gun culture outside of hunting, sport shooting, and military use. And then when I went to England, guns are not, it's not an issue there at all. So when I came back to the States, I had no idea what was going on. And I remember 1 week after the shooting at Dylan's memorial service, the first time I spoke to press afterwards, someone asked me, what do you think about Wayne LaPierre today, saying that the best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And I looked at her and I said, who's Wayne LaPierre? I didn't know who the NRA was. I didn't know anything.
Who is that?
He was the CEO of the NRA at the time.
God.
Recently forced to step down. I was clueless about this, and that was right at the start. I didn't know about violence. I didn't know about shootings. I didn't know about guns. But I know how to learn, and that is what I've been doing for the last 12 years.
As a society, topics like gun abortion, all of this has been so relevant and too common, that it's so separated with what people think and what they don't. I mean, when I first moved to England a year ago, I just remember every time I would see something in the news or another shooting or another anything. And then, I would tell someone or they would say to me and they would be like, well, England has knives or this person got stuck. And I'm like, it's
not
different.
the same. It's not. You
It's
can't.
different.
You can't kill 26 people in less than 5 minutes with a knife.
And I feel like, I'm not a parent, but I would just imagine any parent out there that knows that their child can walk into a movie theater or a mall.
Yeah.
And that only happens in America.
It does.
And it still just baffles me. I mean, I'll never forget when I was living in Texas, which is like very gun heavy in Austin. I remember I went on a date with a guy and we went to a shooting range and it took me, I think, an hour. And at that point I did it, like I shot the gun at this range because I wanted him to think I was cool. And it was the most terrifying thing. Yeah. And it still shocks me to this day, but everyone has their own opinion on this particular topic.
Yeah.
So, with Sandy Hook Promise, you said within 24 hours of the tragedy occurring, you guys had decided to do something or start something?
Well, no, the community members had been gathering to figure out what to do. And then they started reaching out around Christmas time. And then it quickly became this, originally it was called Newtown United. And I think I think there was a conversation where it sounded too much like a sports team. So they changed the name to Sandy Hook Promise. We chose logo. We chose, we heard about the promise that an agency had written that we modified slightly, as I recall. And then we moved towards launch. So it was basically anyone who wanted to be involved, any impacted family who wanted to be involved could. And I was one of those ones that said, yes, count me in, full body yes, I'm there.
Do you feel like because you got so involved with something that was going to really shape the way that people view guns and children, that allowed you to kind of grieve a little bit less heavy?
I think it gave me something to do because I was lost. I can't even, there are no way to put into words grief. We all experience grief. We experience the loss of parents, of grandparents, of friends. I can't just put into words to have a child, and that is an extension of yourself, that is your living heart, and then suddenly it's gone. It was unfathomable. It was unreal. I would wake up every morning just assuming I'd been having a bad dream. I would touch the walls thinking that I wasn't actually in reality, that this couldn't be what was going on, that beautiful 60-pound, 6-year-old boy was no longer present on this earth. I had to do something, but in those times and this gave me something to do. It gave me a way to channel my love into action and to try to do something to help anyone else from ever being in my position. Because from the outside, I might look okay, but there's still grief and turmoil inside.
For anyone who's watching and has gone through any form of, tragedy with a child or even just family or friends, what is your number one piece of advice for them to get through the day? I mean, now, years later, the day that it happens, 6 years in.
It takes, I think you have to give yourself a lot of grace and time. And when people want to help you, let them. Because you can't do it on your own. It gets so hard, and you think you're going crazy, and you get incredibly dark with your thinking. I was at high risk for a while there in terms of self-harm, and it was probably because of my surviving son more than anything else that I couldn't do that. But also, if you give yourself the grace of time and space, the waves of grief, there's more time in between them, and you can figure out a way forward. I don't think there's no such thing as closure. There's no such thing as this grief circle that you suddenly then you stop. I've not experienced that, and I don't know anyone else who has experienced that, but you can find a way forward again. And unfortunately, I spend a lot of time talking with other parents who have lost children in school shootings or in suicide or other mass events, and all I can say to them is, all I can do is listen to them, empathize, and show them that it'll never be the same, but you will find a way forward again. And for me, I finally found a way to have joy again, which takes time, but it is possible and does happen.
You've done TED Talks. I mean, you've won incredible awards for this. You're pretty much the face of this particular organization. I think when people think of it, they think of you from like Today Show interviews or whatnot. So I'm curious from the business perspective you have, but also having gone through this tragedy, what does it feel like to be the face of this organization that does so much good based on something that is so bad?
Yeah, it's not something I ever wanted, that's for sure. I am definitely more of a behind the scenes person rather than the front person. I'm incredibly proud of my organization, and what I don't do enough of is slow down and recognize all that we've achieved, the legislation we've passed, the movement we've helped build, the school shootings that we've stopped, the suicides that we've stopped, the amazing team that I have working with me.
100 plus people.
Yeah, including some. It's over 140 right now with some vacancies. It's 160. I mean, and we're a very large organization, much larger than most people think, and our impact and reach is huge. We've trained over 31 million youth now, 5.7 million just in the last year. That makes me incredibly proud, and it's hard to think about, because I'm always thinking about the business. I know every intimate detail of the business and the vision, and I know what we need to achieve, and I'm setting this organization up for the long term. I want to stop school shootings, but I'm also conscious that there's so many other forms of youth violence and self-harm. So I'm also always thinking about, okay, what does this look like in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years? What infrastructure, capabilities, and competencies, and research, impact evaluation, engagement, what do I need to be building now for this organization to continue to help youth once I'm not here anymore? Because I can't be the face forever. That would actually hurt the organization. Yeah. So I think about that, like succession planning and what does the future look like a lot while dealing right now with today's issue.
So the number one, though, goal is to obviously prevent school
Absolutely.
shootings.
Number one, stop school shootings and to teach kids and empower youth to take control back. You mentioned you were a sophomore in high school when Sandy Hook happened. There are so many kids that this has continued to happen to over the last 12 years, practicing active shooter drills, practicing for danger, the fear of going to school, the fear of going to movie theaters or shopping malls. Control has been ripped out from underneath us. This feeling of safety has been ripped out. How do we empower youth to practice inclusivity, to recognize when someone needs help, to take threats seriously? These are all actions that we can take that will create long-term change. So, number one, school shootings should not exist.
Do you want guns to be completely banned from society if you had a wish?
I do not. It's a weird one because I am not a gun owner. I have never been a gun owner, and I have no desire to be a gun owner. But I also recognize that's my choice for my circumstance, that it's not for me to dictate someone else's choice because they might have different needs. The vast majority of gun violence, people impacted by gun violence, are actually gun owners. So there is a part of this movement that we can't keep polarizing anti-gun or pro-gun and think about what does safety mean and what does protection mean by person, and how do we help ensure responsibility, secure storage, things like that. I've yet to meet a person who owns a gun that is pro-gun violence, but they haven't felt part of this movement. I also think with the sheer number of guns in the United States, if all we did was talk about banning guns or taking guns away, it's not realistic. So I'm not going to deal with this kind of existential crisis of we need to get rid of all the guns. The guns are here, so how do we deal with the problem with them present?
So interesting, because there's so much even outside of Connecticut, right? And you're right, I don't think they'll ever go away.
No.
But I guess it's trying to tackle this problem with kids in schools, but also there's other major shootings. I mean, going through the process of building this organization and the fact that unfortunately these shootings still occur.
Yes.
How do you feel like when, I'm assuming someone calls you and is like,
when I get
it's happened again. Like, it's so fucked.
It's
like, how else do you?
It is very fucked. And it hurts. Every single it when a Google alert comes through of a school shooting or a news alert, or my team informs me if I haven't seen the news yet, and they'll inform my co-founder and partner Mark as well. It's every single time you go straight back to 12/14, you go straight back to December 14th, and knowing how that felt like in that moment, and thinking about these parents and thinking about what they're going to be going through in that moment, that night, the next day, the week after, the future ahead of them. And it hurts my entire organization because we are 100% committed to stopping these. So when a shooting happens, we feel like we failed. Even if it's a school that we haven't spoken to before, it feels like a failure because we didn't work fast enough. We didn't get out there enough. We haven't done enough to stop this. And yet we have to keep reminding ourselves of all of the acts of violence that we have stopped. So we know our model works. We know it's possible. But the fact that it's still happening, it can be very depressing. When your whole mission is to prevent something and the acts continue, you can feel like a failure at times. So focusing on the successes and then just diving back down into the work. And again, channeling, kind of like I did back in January 2013, channel that grief, that love, that anger into action. And never giving up, because young people deserve this. School shootings need to stop, and we can't ever give up until they do stop.
Can you tell me a little bit about how, when you said, I think it was how many, 16 or 19?
16.
That you guys have, stopped from happening. What exactly is the core, aside from obviously, gun activism and anti-gun violence, that it does to stop that? Is there a curriculum?
Yeah, so we have programs where we teach in school, grades K through 12, and all the curriculum is scaffolded appropriate to age and developmental need. The Say Something program, which is one of our flagship programs, is where we teach young people how to recognize signs of someone who could be at risk of hurting themselves or someone else. So it deals with the whole spectrum of violence, from bullying through to cutting, substance abuse, dating violence, all the way to suicide and homicide at the other end. And when a child or a young person, sorry, I keep saying child, it's kind of anyone under the age of 18 really that we're training. When we teach them how to recognize someone who needs help and say something either to a trusted adult or to our anonymous reporting system, which is a 24/7, 365 crisis center down in Miami that is taking all of these tips through like the anonymous reporting system app. They're triaging, they're categorizing, they're building relationships with tipsters. When it's a life safety tip of imminent harm or danger, the crisis team works with the local school team and local law enforcement to create an intervention. So what that looks like in terms of a school shooting. A couple of years ago, there was one that we stopped in Houston, Texas, and we had trained the school in Say Something and the anonymous reporting system. We then had several dozen tips one day from tipsters from across the school saying, this person says they're going to shoot up the school. They sent us screenshots of the social media posts and everything. We actually even had the would-be shooter tip himself in, say, I've got my Glock, I'm ready to roll, come and find me. Because of all the tips and the work with the school team and local law enforcement, we can triangulate and identify who that student is, where they live. Local law enforcement can go in, and if it is a credible threat where there are plans, where there are means such as guns, and where there are access to the weapons, they know that this was imminent. It's hard because when we're saying nothing happened, it can be hard. So we have very strict data definitions of those 16 credible school shootings. There have to be formed plans. There has to be imminent danger. There has to be access to weapons for the law enforcement people to then say to us, this was about to happen. And then we count that as an intervention. So that's one example of how we do that. And the same with over 700 suicides that we've prevented. There was one a few weeks ago where a kid reported in and said, I'm worried about my friend. She says she's going to hurt herself, sent us photos of the screenshots of the texts. The friend was saying, you need to go talk to your mom. The girl was saying, I'm done. I don't want any more. I'm ready to leave. And we were able to contact the school team and the local law enforcement to get the student's address. They did a welfare check, And when the mom went upstairs with the welfare team, the student was in the act of ending her life at that moment, and she was saved. So those are what we count as the credible lives we've saved.
Yeah.
And we also know that's the tip of the iceberg, because those are just the ones we can prove are about to happen. There were so many more that don't meet our strict data criteria, but there are kids that needed help, and we got it to them.
So the organization goes even further then than just gun violence.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's all youth violence, because we know that school shootings, and for someone to pick up a weapon to hurt someone else, it's not a snap moment. It's not something you wake up in the morning and say, I think I'm going to go shoot up a school. It's an escalating series of events and behaviors that's why we focus on what we call upstream violence prevention or early intervention, because if you can get at the start of that and create a connection, make someone feel seen, valued, and heard, have them understand that they're part of community, that they can regulate their emotions differently, manage conflict without resorting to weaponry, then you're stopping it before it ever gets to that extreme end. So that's why we focus on the whole spectrum of violence against self or others as a way to stop the far end of the spectrum, which is homicide.
Wow, that's phenomenal. So the end goal, I mean, is really to stop every school shooting. Like if you could wake up every single day and say, this is what I want to know.
No more school shootings.
Yeah. I have 2 last questions for you. If you are a parent and you're watching this and you're either, number one, you have anxiety or fear about your child in school or situations, advice for them. And second of all, and this question I don't know if you can answer, advice for parents who are like, I feel like my child could be a next school shooter.
And that does happen. For parent, I mean, I recognize that, and let's be honest, school shootings are actually a very, very small amount of gun violence. 2/3 of gun violence or death by firearm is suicide. School shootings are a very small percentage. However, it is something that every parent fears. I mean, I've seen enough research studies that I think it's like over 30% of parents are afraid of a school shooting happening at their kids' school like every day. So this is a genuine fear that we have. And unfortunately, it does happen. And there is a lot of violence at school as well. It's not just school shootings. For parents that are scared, I would say talk to your child. If your school doesn't have programs like Start With Low and Say Something from Sandy Hook Promise, bring it to your school or find other violence prevention programming. Go to our website, learn the signs yourself of what an at-risk behavior looks like, and talk to your child about it. Have them learn them. Talk to them about, are you seeing any of this at school? Are you hearing any of this at school? Help them take it seriously. But I think it's super important to engage with your child at every age about this, because they are practicing active shooter drills at every age. So have these conversations. Don't think they don't know what's going on. And for an adult or a parent who is seeing some of these signs in their children, take it seriously and get them help. Because if you're seeing the signs, I can guarantee you other people are seeing the signs as well. So if someone's coming to you and saying, I'm worried about your child, take it seriously. If you're worried about your child, get them the help that they need. We all need help sometimes. We all go through rough parts. And I think it's a parent's responsibility to lean in and not think, my child's perfect. They would never do anything to hurt themselves or someone else. Mm-hmm. If you love your child, express that by getting them the help that they need.
I feel like it's the parents a lot of times here that are missing the warning signs or don't want to be involved or are too scared. Also with mental health, with social media.
There's a lot of stigma, and would you rather be that parent who ignores your child's needs and then they go on to hurt themselves or someone else? Guaranteed you would not.
Yeah. Nicole, what makes you fearless?
Fearless. My son, both of my sons, honestly, there's a part of me that in all honesty, after what happened at Sandy Hook, there's a part of me that thinks there's nothing worse that could ever happen to me. So I have no fear in that regard. But also for my surviving son, Jake, who I love more than life itself, I want him to know that a life lived in fear is not a life worth living. You never know what's going to happen next. So always tell people you love them, always hug them, live each day to your fullest, but also know that the only person that can ever really hurt you is yourself. So step forward boldly all the time and stand firm in your values and beliefs of what you can do.
I would have talked to Nicole for hours more. Not only am I fascinated by her work and the Sandy Hook Promise, but just being in front of this mother and knowing what she's gone through and the fact that she has decided to do so much good with her life following that tragedy is truly remarkable. I hope that you walk away from this episode knowing that both sides of any conversation, both people are enabled and have the right to have their own opinion. Personally, as I stated in this episode, I am anti-gun. I wish guns would be eradicated. However, I know that everyone has their own opinion, and it's not my responsibility to try and change yours. However, I find as a society, we struggle so much to have independent and wise conversations where both sides can understand that they're enabled to have their own opinion and there doesn't have to be such a devastating after situation with two people who have differing opinions. So thank you for respecting mine and Nicole's. If you want to find out more about how to get involved with the Sandy Hook Promise or more about the work that organization is doing to bring awareness to school shootings and gun violence, please head to the show notes. A new episode of Dare to Be Fearless airs every single Wednesday, and I will be back next week. Stay fearless or die trying, you guys. Bye.